You already know something is wrong. Not with the economy, not with your relationships, not with your health, with you. With the way you move through your life as if you are waiting for permission. Permission to believe, permission to expand, permission to stop bracing for the next thing that is going to fall apart. Here is what Carl Jung would tell you, and what almost no one has the courage to hear. The chaos is not happening to you, it is happening through you. And until you understand that distinction, you will keep calling your own patterns fate. That is the premise. That is the challenge. And if something in you just flinched, good, stay with me. Right now, wherever you are, sitting in your car before you go inside, scrolling at midnight when you should be sleeping, on a lunch break pretending everything is fine, I want you to sit with one possibility. Just one. What if everything that has happened in your life, every loss, every collapse, every door that shut in your face, what if all of it was moving in your favor? Not cruelty, not randomness, not punishment, but precise, intelligent, almost surgical preparation for the version of you that is waiting on the other side of this moment. This is not positive thinking. Jung had no patience for that. He called it a flight from reality. What we are talking about is something far more radical, a fundamental shift in the posture you take toward your own existence. A decision, a deep, irreversible, bone-level decision that from this moment forward, you will move through life as if everything, without exception, is always working out for your highest good. Let that sentence expand in your mind. Everything, always, working out. Because here is what Jung discovered across decades of sitting with thousands of human beings in their darkest rooms. When a person genuinely embodies that posture, what he would call archetypal trust and alignment with the self, something begins to happen in their life that people on the outside cannot explain. Doors open that were not there before. Connections appear that could not have been engineered. The right person says the right thing at the right moment. Jung called it synchronicity, and it is not mystical. It is what happens when your inner world and your outer world finally speak the same language. If you have found Carl Jung philosophy, you already know you are not here by accident. Drop an 11 in the comments right now, because 11 is the number of awakening, of the moment a pattern becomes visible and something in you just woke up. Across this country, right now, millions of people are moving through their days wrapped in a low-grade terror they have learned to call normal. What happens tomorrow? How does the debt get paid? Where does this relationship end up? What if the diagnosis is serious? These questions circle like weather systems, exhausting the mind, narrowing the vision, shrinking the life. And most people have no idea they are trapped, because the cage is made of their own thoughts, their own unexamined beliefs about what is possible and what they deserve. Jung was precise about this. He called it the shadow. Not evil, not weakness, simply the parts of ourselves we have refused to look at, the grief we never processed, the rage we were told was unacceptable, the desires we buried because they felt too large or too dangerous. And when we do not look at the shadow, it does not disappear. It runs the show from behind the curtain. It sabotages the relationship just as it is deepening. It engineers the failure just before the breakthrough. It keeps pulling you back to the same patterns dressed in different costumes. But you are here, watching this, and that tells me something significant. You are tired. Tired of the old story, tired of the version of yourself that plays it safe and calls it wisdom. Tired of waiting for some external signal that it is okay to expand, to trust, to stop defending against a pain that has not even arrived yet. That exhaustion is not weakness. That is your psyche preparing you for something. That is the beginning of what Jung called individuation, the slow, courageous process of becoming whole. Jung spent decades at his stone house on the edge of Lake Zurich, mapping the interior geography of the human mind. He studied not just what broke people, but what transformed them. What he found in the most resilient, most fully realized people he had
ever encountered was not the absence of suffering. It was a relationship to suffering that was completely different from the norm. They moved through their lives as if they were in collaboration with something larger, as if the setbacks had meaning, as if the timing, however brutal it felt, was precise. History's most transformed individuals, the ones who seemed to turn everything they touched into something significant, shared one particular quality. They acted as if everything was always working out, even when the evidence strongly suggested otherwise. This is not naive optimism. This is a deep psychological strategy, a deliberate, practiced orientation to life that changes everything it touches. Think about the last time things did not go as planned. Maybe a relationship you had built your identity around ended on an ordinary Tuesday evening. Maybe a business you had sacrificed years and savings for collapsed. Maybe a health scare arrived without warning and the floor dropped out from under you. In that moment, Jung's framework says you were standing at a precise fork. Two paths, no middle ground. One path leads down into the story of victimhood, how unfair life is, how the odds are stacked against you, how struggle seems to find you no matter what you do. That story is seductive. It is warm. It requires nothing from you. It absolves you of responsibility. But it also keeps you exactly where you are, rehearsing the same wounds in a slightly different setting. The other path asks a harder question. What if this is not an obstacle? What if this is a redirection? What if the thing that just ended was taking up the space that something far more aligned needed? And here is what you need to understand. We are not talking about toxic positivity. We are not talking about pretending the pain is not real or performing gratitude while you are bleeding. The Jungian path does not ask you to lie to yourself. It asks you to expand your frame of reference, to hold the possibility that the intelligence operating through your life is working at a resolution you cannot yet see. The way a surgeon's incision looks like damage until you understand what it is removing. When you start to genuinely embody this, not just intellectually agree with it, but actually live from it, your nervous system begins to shift. The chronic vigilance that has been running in the background of your body for years starts to quiet. Your stress levels drop, not because the problems disappear, but because you are no longer spending your finite energy fighting the river. You are learning to read the current, to stroke when you must, to rest when you can, but always trusting that the river knows where it is going. Your decision-making sharpens. The creative part of your mind, the part that has been suppressed under the weight of fear, starts to surface. Your relationships change because you stop relating from a place of scarcity and self-protection. Your physical health responds. Your sleep deepens. The quality of your attention improves. And perhaps most powerfully, you become a field that attracts other people and opportunities operating at a similar frequency, because your signal is finally clear. Now picture this. Jung described the unconscious mind as something like a supremely intelligent personal assistant, one that can see connections you cannot see, access information you cannot access, and whose only assignment is to organize your life in service of your highest development. This assistant works around the clock. It is connecting dots, arranging what look like coincidences, closing certain doors, opening certain windows, placing specific obstacles in your path, and removing others. Every single move is in service of your growth. But here is the catch. This assistant, this deep unconscious intelligence, does not consult your ego. It does not wait for your approval. Sometimes what it sends looks like a mistake, a delay, a loss, a humiliation. Sometimes the path it clears for you requires walking through something you would never have chosen. But the operative truth is this: what looks like chaos from inside the frame is often perfect order from outside it. And when you move as if everything is always working out, you start to develop eyes for that larger order. You begin to perceive the intelligence operating behind what you previously called bad luck. Some of you are thinking right now, that is, beautiful in theory, but you don't know my situation. You don't know how far behind I am. You don't know what I've lost or what I'm carrying. And you are right. I cannot know the specific weight of your particular story. But here is what I do know, and what Jung's case files confirm across thousands of lives. Every person who has ever reached genuine transformation, not just surface success, but deep, lasting inner change, every single one of them passed through a moment when everything looked impossible. When the rational evidence said stop. When the people around them said give up. The difference between those who transformed and those who did not was never the circumstances. It was the response to the circumstances. If your soul has been in that dark corridor, if you have been carrying something heavy for too long in silence, drop 520 in the comments. Because 520 is the frequency of the heart. It is the number of the one who keeps going even when the keeping going costs something. And this community needs to see how many of us are still here, still moving, still choosing. When you act as if everything is working out, you develop what Jung called true responsibility. Not guilt, not blame, but the radical ability to respond. You stop being a passive recipient of what life hands you, and you start being an active participant in what your life becomes. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and you start asking, "What is this asking of me? What is this moment trying to teach?
What part of my deeper self is trying to surface through this friction? That reframe is not philosophical consolation. It has measurable biological consequences. When you move from fear to trust, from ego contraction to self-alignment, your nervous system shifts out of the chronic fight or flight state that has been quietly damaging your health for years. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of creativity, nuanced thinking, and genuine connection, comes back online. The fog lifts. Solutions appear. The right words come. Doors that were always there suddenly become visible. Jung noted something remarkable in his clinical practice in Kuznacht. The people who transformed the fastest were not the most talented, the most educated, or the most resourceful. They were the ones who fundamentally changed their relationship to the unknown. Instead of treating uncertainty as a threat to be neutralized, they learned to treat it as an invitation. Instead of fighting the absence of guarantees, they stopped needing guarantees. They understood that control is largely an illusion, and that releasing the illusion does not make you vulnerable. It makes you free. Look at Jung's own life. Consider the period when everything appeared to be collapsing. His professional career was in jeopardy. His intellectual break with Freud, the man who had been his mentor, his champion, almost a father figure, left him publicly isolated. The academic establishment turned cold. Friends withdrew. He entered what he later described as a confrontation with the unconscious, a period of genuine psychological darkness that lasted years. At that moment, Jung had exactly the same two choices every one of us faces at our own breaking points. He could have contracted, defended himself, spent his energy arguing with the world about how it had misunderstood him. Or he could have done what he did, doubled his trust, turned inward, and treated the collapse as the necessary pressure required to crack open something that had never existed before. He chose the second path, and the years that looked like ruin became the foundation of everything. The professional isolation drove him into his own interior, where the richest material was waiting. The severed relationship with Freud liberated him to follow a truth he had been suppressing for years. The darkness he walked through became the Red Book, one of the most extraordinary documents in the history of psychology. What looked like the end was the forge. Drop 1111 in the comments right now, because 1111 is the portal number. It marks the precise moment when a pattern breaks and something new becomes possible. And what Jung's life demonstrates is that the moment everything falls apart is often the moment the real thing is beginning. This is what acting as if everything is working out actually does. Life stops being a conspiracy against you and becomes something working through you. You stop being a victim of your story and start being its author. The failures stop being endings and become preparation. The losses stop being punishments and start being redirections. The closings stop being permanent
and reveal themselves as the necessary clearing before the next opening. And let us be precise here, because this is where most people misunderstand the Jungian teaching. This is not passivity. This is not withdrawal. This is not sitting still and waiting for the universe to deliver. Jung was a man of enormous discipline, enormous action, enormous output. What changes when you embody this trust is not your effort, it is the source of your effort. Instead of acting from desperation, from fear of what will happen if you fail, you begin acting from inspiration, from alignment, from the calm certainty that even if this particular attempt does not work, something in it will serve you. That distinction between fear-driven action and trust-driven action is the difference between grinding and flowing. And the outputs are categorically different. Think about the most resilient people you have ever known, the ones who get hit hard by life and somehow keep reconstituting themselves, who lose something significant and find their way back to themselves and often to something better. What do they share? Underneath all the surface variation, they share this: a deep, unspoken, almost cellular belief that the story is not over, that the current chapter, however painful, is not the final chapter, that there is an organizing intelligence to their experience that is working, even now, even in this. That is not magical thinking. That is strategic, psychologically sophisticated clarity about how transformation actually happens. Not in the comfort zones, not in the easy seasons, but in the exact moments you are most tempted to collapse. The most accomplished people in any field have one quality that separates them from everyone else. They maintain their belief in possibility even when the data tells a different story. They understand that present conditions are not permanent conditions, that where they are is not where they are going, that the current reality is simply the echo of past thinking, and that by changing the thinking, starting now, the reality begins to shift. Not someday, now. When you align with the energy of everything always working out, you stop waiting for conditions to be right before you give yourself permission to live fully. You stop needing the outcome to be guaranteed before you are willing to invest. You stop shrinking your dreams to the size of your current circumstances, and you start moving with a kind of quiet authority that other people can feel. Not arrogance, but settledness. The deep settledness of someone who no longer needs the world to cooperate before they decide to be whole. Now think about the energy you spend. Be honest. Think about the hours, the genuine, irreplaceable hours you give to imagining what could go wrong. The mental processing power devoted to rehearsing worst-case scenarios. The emotional capital invested in anxiety, in preemptive grief, in defending yourself against things that have not happened yet. What if you redirected even half of that toward what could go right? What if you used that same cognitive capacity for what Jung called active imagination? Deliberately constructing the mental and emotional reality of the life you are moving toward. What if all that energy went into acting as if everything, right now, is unfolding exactly as it should? The human brain evolved to scan for threats. In a different era, in a different environment,
That bias kept us alive. But in the modern world, a nervous system that is always scanning for danger is a nervous system that cannot think creatively, cannot relate deeply, cannot take the kinds of risks that real growth demands. The survival mechanism has become the limitation. When you deliberately, consciously choose to operate from the assumption that everything is working out, you begin to reprogram that ancient circuitry. You train the brain to scan for opportunity instead of threat. You condition the nervous system to operate from groundedness rather than alarm. You build new neural pathways, literally new infrastructure in your brain that make this orientation easier over time, more automatic, more available when you need it most. This is not a destination. This is
a practice. Like any practice, it requires repetition. It requires you to choose it on the days when the evidence is loudly against you, when the account is empty, when the relationship feels irreparable, when the body is struggling, when the people around you are telling you to be realistic. Those are not the moments when the practice fails. Those are the moments when the practice is most alive. Those are the moments that show you what you are actually made of. And something extraordinary happens as you practice. You begin to accumulate evidence. You start to notice the synchronicities you were previously too closed to see. You start to recognize how many things that looked like disasters were actually essential course corrections. You develop a felt sense of the intelligence that has always been operating in your life, not as an abstraction, but as a lived experience. That felt sense becomes its own kind of fuel. The trust deepens. The capacity to act from trust expands. More evidence arrives. The cycle accelerates. And what begins as a deliberate, sometimes effortful practice becomes something closer to a way of being. A new default. A new ground from which you move. You stop rehearsing the past in search of evidence that life is against you. You stop projecting worst-case futures as a form of self-protection. You start living in the present with something that might be the rarest emotion available to human beings. Genuine, grounded, undefended expectancy. Not naivety, expectancy. The quiet readiness of someone who knows something good is on its way. Not because the world has promised anything, but because they have decided to be the kind of person who finds the good in whatever arrives. Most people never test this. They never actually run the experiment. They read about it, nod thoughtfully, and then return to the exact same mental habits they have been running for 30 years. Because the familiar, even when it is painful, has a gravitational pull. The known suffering feels safer than the unknown expansion. And so they stay. Not because the life they want is impossible, but because the leap requires releasing a narrative that has quietly become their identity. Here is what that narrative often sounds like, translated into its most honest form. I am someone to whom things happen. I am subject to forces I cannot influence. My circumstances are the ceiling and the floor of what is available to me. My past is a prediction of my future. And as long as that is the operating story, as long as the unconscious is running that script, it will continue to produce exactly the evidence that confirms it. This is not metaphysics. This is psychology. The mind finds what it is looking for. It filters reality through its existing beliefs and presents you with a curated selection of experience that proves those beliefs correct. Jung called this the complex, a cluster of emotionally charged beliefs built early, reinforced constantly, operating below the threshold of awareness. The complex around worthiness says, "Things this good do not happen to people like me." The complex around safety says, "Trust is dangerous. Control is survival." The complex around possibility says, "Be realistic. Manage expectations. Do not reach too far." And every day, these complexes make decisions on your behalf, while your conscious mind believes it is the one in charge. Acting as if everything is always working out is, at its deepest level, a direct intervention in the complex. It is a deliberate, sustained disruption of the story the wounded self has been telling. It is choosing, again and again, on the days when it is hard, especially on the days when it is hard, to inhabit a different narrative. Not a dishonest one, not a delusional one, but a larger one. One that includes the pain and the loss and the confusion, and still says, "There is something working here that I cannot fully see yet, and I am going to move as if I trust it." That is the practice. That is the whole practice. And it changes everything it touches. The question is not whether this is possible. Jung's work, his patience, his own life, and the lives of every person who has walked through genuine transformation all confirm that it is. The question is whether you are ready. Ready to release the story that has been keeping you manageable, predictable, and safe. Ready to stop waiting for circumstances to align before you give yourself permission to trust. Ready to move in your career, in your relationships, in your health, in your creative life, as if the foundation is already solid, even when you cannot see it yet. You do not need to have it all figured out before you begin. You do not need to eliminate the doubt before you choose the belief. You do not need a guarantee before you take the first step. You only need to be willing to run the experiment, willing to act as if, willing to discover what becomes possible for someone who actually lives this way. And here is something important. This is not something you do once and then have. It is not an insight you arrive at and then possess permanently. It is a daily, sometimes hourly, sometimes moment by moment returning. You will forget. You will contract. You will slide back into the fear-based operating system because it is old and familiar, and the neural grooves run deep. That is not failure. That is the nature of genuine change. The practice is not the arriving. The practice is the returning. Every single time you catch yourself spiraling into worst-case thinking and consciously redirect toward trust, you are strengthening a new structure inside yourself.
Every time you choose curiosity over catastrophizing, you are building the version of you that lives as if everything is working out. Not as a pose, but as an actual orientation to existence. There will be days when this feels impossible, when the weight of what you are carrying makes the whole framework sound like something a person says who has never really suffered. On those days, I am not asking you to perform positivity. I am asking you to hold one thing, just one, the possibility that this moment, as hard as it is, has not finished revealing what it came to give you. That is enough. That single thread is enough. Hold that and keep moving. Imagine waking up tomorrow and moving through the entire day as if everything in your life is working perfectly toward your highest good. How would you walk? What would your voice sound like? What conversations would you have? What risks would you take? What would you finally allow yourself to begin? Sit with those questions. Really sit with them. Because the answers are not abstract. They are the exact shape of what is waiting for you. They are the outline of the life that has been standing just behind the door of your own hesitation. Only one thing stands between you and that life. Not circumstances, not history, not the economy or the timing or the people around you. A decision. The decision to act as if everything, right now, in this moment, with all its mess and all its uncertainty, is working out. Not someday when conditions improve. Now, exactly as it is. If this reached something in you, if something in these words found a place that had been waiting to be found, then go to the comments and write, "My energy creates my reality." Not because it is a clever phrase, because it is a declaration, a signal, a commitment made in public, witnessed by a community of people who are choosing the same thing. That matters more than you think. Drop 777 below, because 777 is the frequency of alignment. It is the number of the soul that has stopped fighting and started trusting. And if that is where you are right now, if you are ready to stop surviving your life and start creating it, then this community needs to know you are here. Subscribe to Carl Jung.